in internet connections that might not be the best. But in the future, we think we can innovate to reach more and more people. We think part of the solution is going to be something like AI, which we'll talk about a little bit later today, to help you learn to code, to help you understand your code. So there's a lot of things that we have to build to get to that billion number, but we want to set something really ambitious so that, we know what we're aiming at. I mean, we're just like not lost in the day to day. So we talked about why we're here. Now I want to take you back to where it all started. And as many of you know, I was born and grew up in Jordan. And while we didn't have a lot growing up, we had access to computers at a young age. And I taught myself programming, and that really opened a world of opportunities for me, leading to this point where I'm talking to you. When I was a teenager, I built my first business. I was really obsessed with Counter-Strike and esports. I used to go to these LAN gaming environments. I don't think they have them anymore. Maybe there's a few of them, but you used to walk into a shop and there's computers and you can like go in and play a game with other people. Now you can do it on the internet. Back then, bandwidth did not allow, so you had to go somewhere and play LAN games. And what I noticed is, at least back in Jordan, they did not use any software to manage these stores, and they did a lot of things manually. What I noticed that was my first, at least back in Jordan, was they did not want to build the software to manage these stores. And it took me literally 2 or 3 years. I think I started when I was 12, and I shipped my first product when I was 15. And I remember at the time I was at home programming all the time. My friends thought I died at some point. Like they just didn't see me out in the neighborhood playing, and they would like check in with my family just to see what happened to me. I was so obsessed with this idea, I wanted to bring it to life. But it was difficult. Figuring out how to package the software was difficult. Figuring out how to do databases was difficult. But it was a very, very edifying experience, and I also made a lot of money from it. When the time came to go into college, I wanted to do something other than programming. I thought I had mastered programming. Now I know that I was nowhere near that. But just because I could write some Visual Basic and I could ship software, I wrote a little bit of PHP. I thought there wasn't a lot more left to learn. So I wanted to branch out and learn other things. I went into, I also thought that like at some point AI will automate software, which turned out to be way, way ahead of its time. Maybe someday, but it's going to be way further in the future. So I went into computer engineering. I wanted to study how computers were made, so maybe I could understand computers better, and maybe I could create a job from that. And so went into university to study computer engineering. And pretty soon I figured that I really like programming a lot better. I learned a lot. I learned a lot of low-level things that would help me in the future, especially as we're building Replit. And at the time, I started learning about the history of programming languages. I was reading Paul Graham's blog, and Paul Graham is now a Replit investor, which is awesome how all these things kind of connect. And he was writing about Lisp and writing about the early days of programming. And that really inspired me to learn more. And he was writing about Lisp and writing about the early days. Sort of has that like the one line of code that represents our company: read, eval, print, loop. And what I noticed almost immediately that it's really hard to learn a new programming language. You have to go through the docs and figure out how to install it. Well, first of all, you have to have a computer that you own so you can install software on it. And then you write some code. But say you want to share that code, or say you want to share the app, the result of that code, or you want to code with other people. It was really unclear how to do that. It's still very difficult to do that without Replit. And then as I changed my major into computer science, I would see students and professors using Word docs to send code around. It just felt very backwards. It felt in the same way that when I wrote that software to manage the LAN gaming store, where you had a lot of computers, but they did things manually. It was the same thing where we have all these computers that we're writing code on, but we're not really running it. We're sending these Word docs around. And so I started searching, can you code on the internet? I started searching around, like, can you code in the browser? Google Docs had just come out, and I thought, of course, there's going to be something like Google Docs, but for programming. So that was around 2009. And there was nothing. There was almost nothing. There was some experiments going around. I think Mozilla had an experiment around coding in the browser. But I really couldn't find anything that would solve my problem. So naively, I started building what became the first multi-language browser sandbox. I recruited some friends from university to work with me. Haya, who's now my co-founder, helped us with the design and the UI and the logo at the time. And we open sourced the creation. So what we did, we ended up being the first project to compile languages that are not JavaScript to JavaScript. At the time, there was this experimental project called Mscripton, which is now known as WASM. It was coming out of Mozilla, and we found it, and we were very early to find that project. And we ended up compiling a bunch of languages like Python, Ruby, and Lua, and a bunch of languages we liked into JavaScript. And we open sourced that engine, and we call it JS REPL. And then we built the sort of the, what became Replit, the UI on top of that. And that went viral. That went super viral, and it was very, very surprising. We announced it on Hacker News, I think. And, I'm now dating myself, but in 2011, Slashdot was still a thing. And so we also made it on Slashdot and Reddit and a bunch of other places. And here we are, few kids in Jordan, going viral on the internet for something we created. Companies started reaching out to us. Eventually, what we built was the start of what became this interactive in-browser programming learning that became like Code Academy and Udacity. All these projects started using the original Replit open source engine to deliver in-browser experiences. After that happened, I realized this could be a much bigger idea. It was not only going to be easy to learn new programming languages, to share code, to code with other people, but it could also change people's lives. For the first time, you could actually start to learn how to code without investing in an expensive machine. You could even do it on your phone if you like. And if we did that and we gave people the tools to learn how to code, then the tools to create and ship, we could this idea could grow into something really, really big. So this was the first kind of Replit UI. You could see the editor on the left. You can see the run button sort of on the corner over there. Not very great UI with that, and the console on the right. And that's it. You could pick a language and you could just write one file and you can like evaluate that code. It had a lot of bugs, especially because it was running in the browser. But it was good enough to prove the idea. People really loved it. After I got my job at Code Academy as one of the founding engineers, we sort of neglected the project for a long time, up until the point in 2016 when Hai and I decided to revive it and make it into a company, which is what we're working on until today. So one of the first things that we did in 2016 was move Replit to the server side. So now you could do things like file systems. You could do things like packages. And this was an early implementation of the file system that we wrote. And basically, when you created a file, it would appear as a tab. So say you're doing matplotlib and you're doing some data science and you generate an image and it would like auto update in the browser. And we thought that was super cool. So that was the first sort of advanced feature where you had multiple tabs, and we didn't have a file tree or any of that, but that was really a great start for us. Then came the community. Actually, we had the way the community, and like the way, like, all of you today, a lot of you that are in the Replit community, like the start of this was so strange. So basically, we had a bug board called Canny, and we used it just for people to report bugs and vote on feature requests. What we saw was that people were starting to share their programs there. So in this case, I remember a user called Pi Elias, and he built a chat system in the REPL. So at the time, we didn't have hosting. We just had opened up internet connection inside the REPL. And so he made a backend REPL that stored the state, and then a front-end REPL where you fork it and then you join the server. And so you had the chat in the REPL itself. And they posted it on our bug board, and then people started using it. And I remember looking at this, it was like, okay, this is very strange. And I log into it, I run the code, and suddenly seeing tens and hundreds of people chatting. And it's almost like we had this shadow community that we did not know existed. It was really fun, and people were sharing things, and people were talking about their programs. They were asking questions. Sort of, this was the proto Discord. That was before we had the Discord. And because of this fun coincidence, we decided to make community a big part of what we do. It was really inspiring to see a lot of, especially young people, building things and sharing it and helping each other. That really opened our eyes to what could Replit become. It was not only going to be this online sandbox where you could learn a bit of code and practice programming, but you could also join a community of creators and build things together and really have fun and enjoy the act of building. So that was the initial community aspect, which now we're on the third or fourth iteration of, with the new community design that we launched earlier this year. Hosting was another big one. We were actually just got into Y Combinator. Y Combinator is this accelerator that you go in for 3 months, and as the name suggests, you sort of accelerate your product roadmap so you can get to market as fast as possible. At that point, we realized that people wanted to do more with Replit. They wanted packages, they wanted to host their programs, they wanted to launch apps and get feedback on them. So we decided the next big step is going to be to make it so that you can host the programs. At the same time, we built the file tree on the left. And one thing that still lives with us today is we decided to keep the interface very simple. A lot of companies at this point will start complicating things. Maybe we'll start building different versions of the product. And we thought about all of this. Maybe there's like a simple REPL, maybe there's a projects REPL where you could do hosting or whatever. But we decided to keep it simple. We're like, all right, we're not going to make the entry experience worse. We just want to add a new feature to make it better. So we did this thing where whenever you start a server, we detect it on the back end and then open the window for you. That's like the web view. It was on the bottom right at the time. Now it's in the top right. And we hosted the program for you once you start listening on the port. So that kind of magical experience is basically like detecting what the user does and what the user intends to do, and then doing it for them has become a big part of our design philosophy, and just to keep the interface simple and then expand it with time. And I'll talk a little bit more about what we're doing with regards to this idea of like simple yet scalable. This is a theme that we try to continue to innovate on. Is like start simple, but it should be powerful enough to support your entire workflow. Multiplayer was a big milestone in Replit's history. I think the first version was also 2018, maybe in the fall of 2018, and the first version actually sucked. We did this thing where we hosted a separate server that was the multiplayer server that did operational transforms, that did the live editing, that did the chat and all of that. And then you had the REPL in a different place, essentially on a different server, the container. And the way you collaborate is by going through this intermediary server that does the collaboration for you. And that was full of bugs, and that was full of state issues, because now you had like 3 different sources of truth: your browser, the collaboration server, and then the container REPL itself. And then this took multiple iterations. We ended up rewriting our entire infrastructure, and we wrote a blog post about it at the time. We talked about making Replit collaborative at heart. And then Replit became the first by default collaborative code editor. Most code editors that want to add collaboration features, you have to turn them on. With Replit, actually, it is collaborative even in the default state. So try this: open a REPL twice in 2 different tabs. You have to You're going to see the cursor. You can code in different tabs at the same time, and you can see yourself like editing the document in real time. And so Replit is still, I think, the most advanced multiplayer editor in the world. And that's because we tried really hard to kind of bake it into the system and not have it as an afterthought. All right, so that was the kind of the last phase of Replit's history, where we were a very small team. We didn't have access to a lot of capital. As Lena mentioned, it took us 2 or 3 years before we got into YC. We got rejected 4 or 5 times. Roy, who's going to be talking later today at the closing keynote, was kind of the investor that took a chance on us. And but at a time where nobody would talk to us. I remember pitching 100 investors, and they would all, some of them would yawn and even sleep in the when I'm pitching them, and there was really no interest in what we're doing. And then so for the longest time, we were 4 or 5 people kind of working on this project. But recently we've been able to make a lot of progress that allows us to get a lot more support, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But let's take a snapshot of where we are in terms of our community and our growth. Today we have more than 10 million coders on the platform, and just last year we doubled that. So we started 2021 with 5 million. We ended up with 10 million. So like doubling the number of coders in 1 year. You all built more than 20 million apps and websites on the service. And so that sort of boggles my mind, that kind of scale we're operating at. Just to give you an idea, it's these user apps are getting more than 10 billion visits a month. And so Replit in its own right is becoming this somewhat large computing and infrastructure that we're having to manage. So the company, like I said, you can see sort of this graph. On the y-axis is the number of employees, on the x-axis is the year. And so 2016, 17, 18, we're like 2, 3, 4 people. But in 2019, we doubled to 8. 2020 to 16. 2020 to 32. And now we're approaching 60 employees. So we've been doubling the number of employees year over year. And as you can see, we've been able to make more progress. A lot of companies, as they start to grow, they actually slow down. Replit actually have accelerated product development tremendously as we've grown. And just recently, we hired an executive team just as part of growing up as a company. We have a CFO, we have a head of BD and a general counsel. And of course, we have VP of engineering, growth, and all of that, and head of design. And so that's like really entering a new phase of the company's life. And we managed to raise now over $100 million. So our last raise was $80 million. And before that, we raised $20 million in Series A. Before that, seed and pre-seed. But now we have a lot of capital to go really build our vision, because we were such a small team, but we had a really big ambition. Now we're a good sized team, and we're going to really finally be able to execute on these big ideas. So here's the team last year. This is at our offsite, and this is around the time I think we're like 25 maybe 30 people. So really more than doubled since then. And we have another offsite coming soon, and we'll take a picture with more of the team. So okay, let's take a snapshot of the product today. Just in the past few months to a year, we've been able to go from supporting a set number of languages to essentially every language and package. So we rewrote our infrastructure to use this amazing technology that's quite niche. Not many people use it, but we think we like to be pioneers. We like to do things differently, but we think the rest of the industry will follow us as they usually do. So we use Nix to rebuild our infrastructure so that you can really get any language or any Linux package in an instant. Like everything is cached, and you don't really have to install anything. So you just select the packages. You just put in the packages in your next description that you'd like, and it will generate essentially a new runtime for you. So I want to emphasize this has never been done before. If you, for example, if you've used Heroku or AWS Lambda or any cloud runtime, typically the runtime is pre-installed for you. So it'll give you the packages you need to build your app. And every once in a while, they'll tell you to upgrade. Hey, new node version came out. Why don't you upgrade your Heroku? And it's like this whole project that you need to do in order to upgrade. For the first time, you have a completely flexible runtime. And with one click of a button, you can generate a new runtime. You can fork someone else's runtime, add a package, change something about the configuration, and generate a new runtime. So this has never been done before. And we're still kind of rolling it out in a way because we rolled out for most of the languages, if not all of the languages, but there's still a lot to do in order to open it up for everyone. We'll talk about that more in a bit. We spent a lot of time, especially around when the pandemic hit. We spent a lot of time making our mobile support a lot better, which led all the way to kind of rewriting our entire editor. Part of the reasoning there is because there were a lot of kids that used to have access to computers at school that now lost the access to computers, and they were trying to use Replit at home. And basically, in the past couple of years, the Replit usage on mobile grew almost 20x. It was less than 1% of our user base that used anything in mobile, and now it's around 20%. So 20x growth is really fascinating on a certain platform, and we think there's way more to come, and I'll talk about that in a bit as well. We also introduced a lot of tools for power users. We introduced boosts, so you can give your REPL more resources. We introduced always on, so you don't have to do pinging hacks, and you can just host your code easily. We introduced resource monitoring, so you can know when you're running out of resources. And we introduced file system persistence, which means that you can store things in the REPL itself. You can have a file system-based database like SQLite, or you can just simply write to files, which a lot of people like to do. And again, this is also something that most providers, most platform as services don't provide. And this is something really unique to Replit, as just persisting all your data. This discussion would not be complete without talking about performance. We've gotten feedback from our users that performance, and by performance, I mean just general reliability, stability, and speed of the product is something really important. And I want to clarify, like, we talk a lot about shipping at Replit. We have this shirt called Shipping Season, and I think we have a website called ship.fast, and we just talk about shipping. But people think that we're really focused on new features, but actually, if you come to Replit and talk to people day to day, you'll see that like a big part of the company is just focused on making things better. So the first chart is BSODs, which is our blue screen of death equivalent for our editor. I'm sure if you're a Replit user for a long time, you've ran into the editor crashes. And we just recently, that was last month, we cut this by 70%. And that was the second time we cut it by equivalent. So we cut it by 50% a few months ago, and now 70%. We're going to drive it to zero. And so that's a big focus for us. Response time for your apps, the proxy response time, we cut it recently by 80%. And we squashed a lot of data loss issue. Like, again, if you're a Replit user from 2019, 2020, you remember we had this endemic data loss issue. Like, there was a good chance if you use Replit for a long time in a single session, especially in multiplayer, you would run into problems of the multiplayer going out of sync, or you would like straight up just lose data, which is awful, which is like the worst thing that a product could do. And so that we took it really seriously, and it's like very, very important for us that you would never lose data, that you trust Replit with everything. And we use Replit internally for our notes. We use it for a lot of our apps and backends and bots. And we think it's like, if it's we need to feel the pain, and we do really feel the pain whenever these issues arise. So I want to make sure that you understand we're focused on that, and that's like a big part of what we do at Replit. All right, so we talked about our mission, why it's important. We talked about the past, where everything started. We talked about how things are today. Let's talk a little bit about the future. What are we building? What's so exciting about Replit? There's so much to get excited about. So let's get into it. So I split it out into three major categories that you should know about. The first one is making Replit your own. The second one is taking Replit with you, and third one is about the future of programming. So making Replit your own. A lot of you, and I'm sure a lot of you in the audience, have written extensions, Chrome extensions, have written, browser hacks, have written clients for Replit, or you reverse engineered our multiplayer protocol and created new clients. There's a lot of hacking of Replit that's really cool, and we want to encourage that. And we want you to feel that Replit is yours. Yes, it's a hosted service, but it should feel yours. It should feel like you have complete control of how it feels and looks, and how it functions. And with that, the one of the top customization requests has been themes. It came up over the years in many different ways. Some of our community have actually written a theme store before that's been massively popular, and we're actually working on that. So not only you can customize your editor and your workspace, you can customize the entire site. And you can publish themes to the community, and other people can use your themes as well. So, and the theme creation experience is actually super cool because it's all live. As you're editing it in a REPL. Every theme is a REPL, and you can kind of customize the colors to your liking and do it all interactively. And it's super fun and easy. Here today, it's mostly focused on the main colors, but in the future, we'll also go into syntax highlighting and how we highlight syntax, so you can customize the entire experience. So after you're done, you install the theme, and that's it. Then you could also publish it. You want to publish it to the community. Again, it's just a REPL. You publish it to the community. It goes under the hashtag themes, and then you can people can go browse the themes that are available under the hashtag, click on one they might like, hit install theme, and boom, you just got a theme. So, and you can fork that theme, and you can also change it. So it follows the entire Replit model. You can fork, remix, republish. So that's themes, and it's coming soon, hopefully the next couple of months. All right, templates, this is nothing new. Templates are very important for getting started. We recently moved, again, with the power of Nix, from the idea of languages to the idea of templates. Like a language is a template. A language is a configuration on top of the base Replit experience. All the base Replit experience is merely based on this like Nix REPL. And then all the customization happen in what we call REPL space. Basically inside the REPL in the user space, you could add features, you could add a debugger, you could add the package manager. Actually, if you go into any REPL and hit the three dots button in the file explorer and click show config files, you can actually see how the template is built. So you can go to the Node.js REPL, for example, and see the underlying mechanics. So it's basically open. We open sourced our language and template engine. And the exciting part is that we're going to let you publish templates. So we want to make it so that in the same way that I showed you that you can publish themes, we want templates to be another thing that you can build on Replit. You can build it for yourself, but you can also share it with others. If you're a school teacher, we've seen professors create templates for their class to solve homework. We've seen developer platforms create templates for their community. And so templates is going to be a huge thing, and we're going to let you publish it, let people fork it and remix it, just like any other REPL. And then search. So for the first time in history, you have access to so many code that's runnable, right? So GitHub is this massive code repository. Replit is also super massive. Replit is now 100 million REPLs, and we indexed all of those and made them accessible in search. Not only that, the big difference is that any piece of code you see on Replit is runnable. Someone wrote it in there and ran it, so you can actually fork it and go run it, go try it. You can search for packages. You can to look at how people use the packages. You can search for people. You can search for community posts. You can search for hashtags. Just to play the video again and show you all the different things. So here's searching for Discord bot. You can see REPLs. You can see templates, code snippets that could be useful for you. People. I don't know who would call themselves Discord bot, but some do. And then posts, docs, hashtags, literally everything you need is searchable from our new search bar. So this is out now to everyone. It came out 2 days ago. So check it out if you haven't. We actually have an entire session about this. We have Soren and Riza at 1 p.m. Talking about this. And all right, somehow my slide stopped working. Okay, cool. With regards to templates and Nix, you should check out Connor and Zach at 1 p.m. They're going to be talking about Nix. And with regards to search, check out the talk at also at 1 p.m. by Soren and Reza. They'll walk you through some of the behind the scenes data stuff that we had to do and some of the product things. All right, so what's next? Taking Replit with you. So we saw how you can make Replit your own. You can customize Replit. You can create themes. You create templates. You can find code from anywhere in the world. And now we want to talk about how we're going to make it really awesome to be able to take Replit wherever you go. So the first thing I want to talk about is geo distribution of our infrastructure. Today, sadly, most of our infrastructure is in the U.S. and the speed of light is pretty fast. But visiting a REPL halfway across the world, for example, a round trip from Mumbai, when we have a lot of users and community members in Mumbai, and apologize for the experience, it's going to get much better soon. It takes a third of a second over really good networks. It could take over half a second for round time. So if you're in the console and you're typing, like every keystroke is second, and that's like really, really annoying and noticeable. So we want everyone in the world to have a great experience. We talk about how Replit is a global community. We started Replit in Jordan. We really care about the international community, and so we want Replit to work really well everywhere. This change requires a huge re-architecture of our infrastructure. So this project has been brewing for a long time. And again, this architecture is going to make Replit faster. It's going to let us geo-distribute Replit in different areas. So, if you're in Mumbai, you probably have a server close to you. And it'll unlock new use cases in the future. Luis is not talking exactly about this, but I'm sure he'll mention aspects of this. He's going to talk about REPL space at 1 p.m., what you can do with Replit. And I'm sure he'll touch on some of the infrastructure work we've been doing around Geo. So, anywhere in the world, you'll be able to take Replit with you. And most importantly is you should be able to take Replit with you on your phone. So if you're traveling, you want to, you're traveling and then you get a phone call and like, hey, your app is not working, or you have a client and you want to fix a bug for them, you should be able to pull out your phone, open the Replit app, edit a bit of code, run it, deploy it, and now you fix the bug while you're on vacation. And of course, there's a ton of people around the world who actually don't have access to computers. We have people, especially coming from Indonesia and places like that, where they're primarily using Replit on the phone. It's fascinating. It's actually, most of them are using Replit on their phones and tablets as opposed to their computers. If you're on TikTok, there's a bunch of like viral Replit tutorials where people show you how to code on your phone. So it's been really fascinating to see. It's like, if you tell any professional programmer that people would want to code in their phone, they'll think you're crazy. But this is how crazy Replit is, and the Replit community, in a good way, how we're radical and different. And so coding on the phone, tablet, anywhere is going to be a big priority for us. So we're hoping to launch an app sometime in the fall on iOS and Android, and it'll have ways to learn how to code. It'll have ways to edit, of course, your code and publish and create and do all the amazing things you expect from Replit. There's a talk, Laima, who heads up mobile engineering. She's talking about building for mobile right after this. All right, so this is about taking Replit with you. And the discussion of the future would not be complete without talking about the future of programming and where we think it's headed. So a few years ago, maybe 2020, when we saw the new language models come out, there was the most famous one is GPT-3 from OpenAI. It immediately caught our attention. And if you follow me on Twitter, you might have seen some of the hacks I did around GPT-3 as to applying it to code. The interesting thing about these language models is that they have very rich representation of code when they're even if they're not really trained just on code, they still understand code in a very interesting way because they understand language. And by the way, code in natural language is actually not that different. There's a lot of things about code that resembles natural language. And we've been exploring this for a while. We released last year, explain code. So if you're a hacker, you could go highlight any piece of code, right click and explain it. And we'll give you the English natural language explanation of the code. And that'll help you learn. That'll help you, especially with search. As you search for a code snippet in the community, you can go into these REPLs and explain the snippets so you can actually understand them. You can copy something from Stack Overflow and ask the AI to explain it to you. And so today we want to give you a sneak peek on something we're working on, which is the ability for the AI to search for errors. And let's see, why is it not playing? Let me click play. All right. So highlight a piece of code. This is a bubble sort. Click look for errors. And then boom, it finds a off by 1 error. So I'm going to pause it just to emphasize what happened here. So there are primarily 2 ways of doing analysis over code. One is static analysis. So writing a parser and an algorithm to figure out what could be wrong with a piece of code. So linting is an example of that. Linting, you have a set of rules for what you think healthy code or beautiful code look like. And, that will run analysis on your code and shows you like, hey, this is a bad pattern but it's a preset set of rules, right? So, and then you have runtime analysis. You have to run the code to see maybe the output is correct or wrong. So unit tests is an example of that. However, there are classes of errors that would not fit in either of those. So for example, like logic errors. And I'm sure, you've had simple things like having a typo in your code and looking at it for, multiple minutes, up to 10 minutes before you find out that like that's, that simple error was a freaking typo. And to detect that requires something way more sophisticated and different than static analysis. It requires a sort of intuition. And the thing about AI and what we're seeing with the large language models is that they have that sort of intuition. So in this case, the AI found that your bubble sort doesn't really feel right. It doesn't exactly know why, but it's like, okay, the error might be somewhere here. And that'll get better in the future and it will explain itself why. But the first iteration of it is about, if you think there's an error somewhere, just highlight that piece of code and ask it to look for errors, and I'll give you a hint as to where they are. So again, highlight, look for errors, and then you'll be able to detect it pretty quickly. Okay, it's an off by 1 error, which happens a lot. And again, linters don't catch that kind of stuff. We have Govin talking right after this, talking about the future of AI at Replit. So this extends to more than just looking for errors and all these tools. It's about how we think about AI holistically and how we think it's gonna power Replit in the future. So that's AI. And then finally, we are also working in pretty advanced stage and new interface primitives. As I mentioned before, one of the interesting challenges about Replit is we want to be accessible, but we want to be powerful. These things are often at odds. Most companies pick one or the other. Most companies will say, we're serious, enterprise, grade software. We're going to be really powerful, but that comes at the cost of an entry experience. For example, Adobe Photoshop or any professional software typically ends up being very, very complicated. At Replit, we rejected that dichotomy. But that's a challenge because now we want to build something simple yet scalable. The current interface is not very scalable because you can't customize it. Again, it goes back to the idea of having more ownership over the Replit interface. So this is a demo of the new sort of IDE experience, and this flipping between mobile and desktop. It's exactly the same components, exactly the same code, just laid out differently. Every one of those panes is actually the sort of the primitive that we're building everything around. And that primitive is this pane. So when you start a pane, it's a launcher. You can open files. You can open output. You can open web view. You can open debugger setting. Whatever you can do with the IDE, they're all built on this single primitive. And what that means is that every pane is actually a full app in itself. And so what that means that you can lay out the IDE in whatever way you'd want. You want split files, you could do that. You want multiple outputs, you can do that. You want a web view, a debugger, and a graphics, you could do that. So infinitely customize your IDE. But on top of that, this also provides the basic infrastructure to open up Replit as a way to build extensions. So in the future, you'll be able to add your own thing here. So you can build an extension, and then you could launch it from one of these launchers. So this creates a lot of flexibility, and every sort of extension can simply be listed here and can be opened anywhere in the IDE. This also creates this. This removes the separation that we have between mobile and desktop. It should be the same code. It should be the same interface, just lay it out differently. And so Tyler's going to talk more about this at 1:30 p.m. So make sure to check out that talk. Sorry. Yeah, make sure to check out that talk at 1:30 p.m. Okay, so I think we're done. Oh, actually, one more thing. I told you to stick around until the end because there's one more thing. You know, when we started Replit, it was very hard to raise money, despite being ambitious and creative, and we had a team that was really dedicated. And the people that really got us was not at the beginning, was not like the professional VC or investor community. It was our community. It was our users. It was you. You understood us from the start. You evangelized Replit. You helped us grow. Some of you are even paying for the service. Thank you. And that all helped us along the way to get to where we are today. As we started raising money, people from the community have asked us, hey, we want to be able to contribute. We want to be able to be part of the journey. And it really mattered to us when people said that they wanted to invest in Replit, because, as part of our ethos is like making opportunity available. And one of the biggest opportunities available for only a few people is the ability to invest in startups. And for us, we really want to make this something that anyone has the ability to do. So today we're opening up a $5 million round to invest in Replit. So this is to the community. You can go to wefunder.com/Replit to see our WeFunder page. You can get more information about the business, and you can show your commitment. We still have to file some documentation in order for this to go live. So we have to file something with the SEC. But now, actually, like the thing that you do is just, if you show your commitment, that's going to be a great way for us to open up the round. So go check it out if you're interested. There are a lot of reasons not to invest in Replit. And by the way, I want to be clear, we don't really need your money. We have a lot of money to continue building our vision. This is just because, people have asked for it, and we thought it would be a really cool thing to do. There are reasons not to invest in Replit. Startups are risky in general, but especially startups like us who are trying to invent something new and bring it to market are going to be especially risky. So if you can't afford to lose the money, please don't invest, and only invest things you can afford to lose. And so basically, you just go to wefunder.com/Replit. And if you ended up contributing, then we will honor your contribution, and we will have you with us in this journey. And, everyone at Replit will be super driven to make your money worth something. And if you can't, it's fine as well. You're still a member of our community, and we still honor you and cherish you all the same. So thank you. This is my talk exactly on the hour, and I hope to see you out there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amjad. Thanks to all of our users for reporting some of those spammy chat messages. I'm sorry about that. We're going to be better about it. But the focus right now is on the amazing announcements that Amjad just made, and we'll be moving into our first round of sessions. I hope you all are really inspired and excited to learn from many of our teammates and our users today. Off we go. Thanks, everyone. Some of those spammy chat messages. I'm sorry about that. We're going to be better about it. But the focus right now is on the amazing announcements that Amjad just made, and we'll be moving into our first round of sessions. I hope you all are really inspired and excited to
Hello, everyone. I hope I'm coming through. Okay, looks like I am. Amazing. Welcome to my session, Learn to Build for Mobile. My name is Lima Tasman, and I am on the mobile engineering team at Replit. So I'm going to share my screen. I have some slides, and we're going to also look at a demo. All right, everyone can see that? Cool. Well, I am super inspired after Amjad's keynote, and there were a lot of cool announcements. I think we all heard about the Take Replit With You part. I will talk a bit more about that later in my talk, so stay tuned. Today, we're going to learn how to make our web apps delightful on mobile devices. And this is a talk for any level of web development. So if you're a beginner or if you know a little bit, this talk is for you. Let's get into it. So making websites delightful on mobile devices is a little easier said than done. And that's because mobile browsers have a lot of quirks. For example, there are layout rendering differences between mobile and desktop browsers. On mobile, we have to think about the keyboard, and you can also pinch to zoom, and you can pan around, and this can cause unexpected changes to our layout. So we have to be aware of that. Unfortunately, there are inconsistencies between common mobile browsers. We have to take into account both Android and iOS and handle them differently at times. Unfortunately, of course, we're dealing with a much smaller screen real estate, and there will be hardware limitations. So we have to be mindful of memory, CPU, network bandwidth consumption. So we can talk for hours about the solutions to these problems. But for today, I'm going to focus on a few key techniques around usability. So at the end of the session, these are the key takeaways. First and foremost, keep it simple. This is a lot easier said than done, but we'll go over some of the intuition behind that. The next step after that is keyboard handling. So handling the keyboard is very important. It's a part of making your app feel very solid, and we'll look at some techniques for that. The next level after that is consider adding gesture-based features. And this is going to take your app up a notch and make it feel a little bit more native. And finally, you can use Replit to test and build on device. It's going to make your life so much easier, and we'll see that throughout the session. So I will pause after each section to answer any questions you have. So please use the Q&A tool. And then I'll hopefully leave some time at the end for any questions. But let's get started. Okay, so I am going to use this little web app I built to explore these concepts. You can also check it out ideally on your phone. It's replicon2022.replitlima.repl.co. And I'm going to switch to demo this on my phone. So let's hope live demos work for us today. One moment. Okay, I'm sharing my phone. Hopefully nothing embarrassing comes up. Okay, so let me very quickly show you the app. Again, it's a very simple idea. It's called Daily. And this is an app that lets you record moments throughout the day and then play them back when you're going to bed, and you can reflect on how your day went. So I've added a little bit of stuff already to my day. I have a cat who's very needy, so I had to attend to that. And then I can also at any time add what's happening now. So I will do that for the session. Let's see. Look, Ma, I'm at RepelCon. All right, I'm gonna add, and that adds to my log. So we'll check in a little bit after to see how the day went. So this is the app, and I'm gonna switch back to the presentation to talk about the takeaways. Okay, so rule number 1, keep it simple. This rule is going to really solve all our problems, right? But what this really means is we want to think about the mobile use cases, the mobile first use cases for your app, and really think about what is the essence of what you want to provide to the user that's on the go or using their mobile device. Part of keeping it simple is resisting the temptation to also be too clever to overcome some of the constraints we talked about. You know, we don't want to overload our web app with lots of floating elements and a lot of complicated transitions. At the end of the day, the best thing to do is to keep it simple. Now, I am reminded of this quote: constraints breed creativity. And I really believe in that. So keeping it simple means paring it down, and it might feel like we're sacrificing something, but the way to look at it instead is you're really pushing your creativity. What can you really do that's fun and delightful, that is still not overcomplicated? So keep this in mind as you work on your project. All right, the other thing is, let's get into something more tactical. So when you are starting your web app, the first thing you're going to do is add this meta tag, which tells the viewport that you want to render your website at the width of the screen size of the device. Most frameworks that you use will provide this out of the box. This is important. It's up to us then to make the experience adaptable and responsive. If you don't include this, what will happen is the browser is going to infer the width of your content. And if it thinks that your content width is bigger than the device, it's going to shrink the content down. And if it thinks that the content width is smaller than the device, it's going to zoom in your content. And
I'd like you to
might have seen some websites that aren't mobile optimized where you see everything, but the font is so small. That's, not usable. Going back to some design principles, the other thing we really want to think about is minding the thumb. So for mobile, we are using our thumb as really the main pointer and the main thing that's experiencing the app. On desktop, we have the mouse and we have the keyboard, which are much more precise instruments. The thumb is not. The thumb is sort of a blunt instrument. So when you're thinking about the layout of your web app, you want to keep it streamlined and think more like a kebab and not like a bento box. Nothing against bento boxes. I love bento boxes, but for mobile, we want to think more like a kebab. Don't be afraid of letting your content scroll. Vertical scrolling is easy. We're used to that now. So the other thing you want to make sure you're doing is have your interactive elements be nice and fat for the thumb. So, you know, have a really good height, have ideally maximum width for those elements so that you can use the site whether you're left-handed or right-handed. Okay, so I'm going to pause there. Any questions about how to keep it simple? Okay, good questions that we will get into right now. Oh no, the REPL is too popular. Okay, well, hopefully it'll come back in a second. Okay, let's move on. Keyboard handling. So the keyboard on mobile devices, I like to think of as our finicky pet. It's something we need, it's something we love, it helps us accomplish tasks, but if you don't do things the way it wants it, it's going to eat our shoes. So what matters is just sticking to this protocol, making the necessary adjustments to handle the keyboard, and then everything will be all right, and our pet is going to love us. So let's get into some specifics. This is a really easy rule to follow, but it's not often, it's not well advertised. You want to stick to a minimum font size for any input element you have on the screen. So text areas, text inputs, stick to 16 pixels. This is something that became a convention through the iOS Safari engine, which wanted to make sure that font sizes were accessible. And if you are much smaller than the 16 pixel font size, it's going to zoom in and make sure that the font is at the scale of 16 pixels. And that will kind of jigger your layout in ways that you didn't necessarily want. So I'm going to jump into the app and show you what I mean. Okay. So we're back to the app. And here I have, so the app is built with Svelte, which is a UI framework. What I like about it is it compiles to very basic JavaScript and HTML, so we get to keep a lot of the conventions. Hopefully it'll be easy to follow along. So I'm here in my component add note editor. This is the component for adding, for showing you the text area. This is the component here, text area. And if I jump to my CSS where I've set the font size, I'm using 1.5 REM, which is another way of saying, is a way of scaling your font sizes to the default body size, which in our case is 16 pixels. So I can basically use pixels as well. So let's say I changed it to 14 pixels. Okay. And then I'm going to jump back into the app. Okay. Whew. I didn't get the REPL unavailable problem. Okay, so see what happened? My layout immediately zoomed in. And now I can sort of zoom back out, but by default, what's happening is the add, a major control like the add button, it gets cut off screen. So this is an iOS specific feature, but it's a good rule of thumb to just apply it universally. So if I go back to my code and I change this back to 1.5, so 16 plus 8. So I'll use pixels this time. Okay, and then I go back. We should not have that problem. Cool. All right, so now the layout did not get readjusted, so that's great. Okay, switching back. All right, the next thing we're gonna ramp it up a little bit is another important thing you wanna make sure you're doing is adjusting to the viewport changes. So modern browsers now provide an object called the visual viewport. And this is basically an object that tells you the visible dimensions of the screen, taking into account the keyboard. If you're not using the visual viewport, you're actually measuring against the layout viewport, which is the initial height of the document. So if you've ever used VH, viewport height, dimensions, that's going to be based on the initial layout, not the layout when the keyboard is up. And unfortunately, when the keyboard is up, it causes some funkiness. So this is actually really easy to do. In your JavaScript, you can just listen to this event called resize, and whenever it fires, you can grab the viewport height and then set that viewport height to your root element on the page. And let me jump into the demo again. Okay, so here's what I mean. Let me use a background so that we can see the difference. So I'll use green. Okay, so let's go back to this page. So green is, this is showing you what the full root element is taking up. When I dismiss the keyboard, you see that the whole screen is still green. And when the keyboard comes up, you sort of see for a moment that the box is smaller, but it still fits within the new visible height. So what happens if I remove that logic? So let's go up to my code. So here we are. Pretty much the same as a snippet. So I'm going to, let's comment this out, comment this line out. Okay, I think that looks right. So we're still listening to resize, we just won't do anything. And let's see what happens instead. Okay, so let me demonstrate this again. Okay, so now the height is just going to be hugging the contents of the elements. And if I dismiss it, nothing happens. But what about when you start to type a lot and it overflows? So let's try that. Okay, let's create a poem on the spot. This is a poem. Okay, so now because the height is set to this initial height, the overflow is very small. Okay, so if you're in the situation, you might, again, try to use viewport height units, and I'll show you what happens when you do that. So if I go here, and so here I'm using height 100%. As we just saw, what this does is it says, I'm going to use the height of my parent, but my parent doesn't have a height, so I'm going to actually fit to the contents. And instead, we actually want to use viewport height by instinct. So if I do that, okay, now it's starting to look sort of right. This is what, we would initially want. But what happens when the keyboard comes up? You get this ugly overflow, right? And not only that, if I sort of keep typing, we don't really see what I'm typing. And that is not, that's not very comfortable for us. So instead of using viewport height units, I recommend adding this little bit of JavaScript and setting, here I'm using 100% as just a default, but I recommend setting the height to be explicit based on the viewport. So I will just uncomment this out and we'll get our beautiful, correct height. And I'll remove the background. Cool. Okay, we're learning a lot today. I'm going to switch back to the presentation. Any questions about keyboard handling? Let's see.
Lima, there are a few questions. I don't know if you want to wait till the end to answer them. It's up to you.
Let's see if there's a quick one I can answer.
You should see them in the Q&A.
Ooh, okay. Yes, these, yeah, we can publish these slides after the session for sure. As for this question, hamburger nav bars for mobile are okay to have on the top right. Yeah, I would say by now it's a very common design pattern, so I think it's a-okay. But there will be some interesting, again, some of those inconsistencies in how browsers handle fixed elements will cause some situations that you wouldn't expect. So on iOS, for example, it doesn't respect position fixed if the keyboard is up. Or if you scroll, when the keyboard is up and you scroll down, it's going to try and move the layout viewport as opposed to the element that's in focus. And the hamburger menu can go off screen. And that can sometimes be confusing to users. So in general, stay away from too many fixed position elements. If you just stick to the hamburger nav bar, and that's the only one, that's totally fine. And users will expect to see it in the top, somewhere in the top corner anyway. Okay. And challenge for the audience. So another piece of this that will make keyboard handling even better for users is being able to actually scroll the text area to where the cursor is placed. So if you write that long poem like I just did, and then dismiss your keyboard, and then click on the keyboard again, it will focus the text area. But if you've chosen to place a cursor somewhere below where the keyboard would come up, it doesn't automatically scroll to that. So there is a way to do it. I want to give you the opportunity to try and hack that together. And if you do, you'll get some extra credit from me. Okay, so last major thing I want to talk about is how to add gesture-based features. So this is really where, now that we've built a really simple but thoughtful application, and we have all the solid functionality in place, now's our chance to add some whimsy and add some fun and make the web app feel a little bit more native on mobile. So it's actually not that scary to do. There is a very well supported touch event that all major mobile browsers support. And the way you can plug into that touch event is these 4 events: touch start, touch move, touch end, touch cancel. And they pretty much sound like their names. Normally, I recommend that you add an event listener to a specific element for touch start. And only when the touch start event triggers, add the other three touch events. That way, you won't have too many events registered on the document. That can cause a lot of weirdness. It can be a performance hit. This way, you'll just be listening to the specific node in question. I will show you, maybe you have already seen this, but I will show you how I added it to the web app. Okay, my phone keeps falling asleep. Okay, so if you go to the app, so what's happening now? I am showing gestures. Cool. Okay, so if you scroll all the way up, you can actually start to swipe on an individual item. Ooh, let's see. It's too popular again. Okay, well, you can swipe on an individual item. It doesn't do anything yet, but I wanted to just show it to you so that you can add something extra that would be really cool if you're swiping on one of those items. For example, you might be able to swipe and delete the log, or you can swipe and make it a shareable snippet. There's all kinds of possibilities, but here's how it works. So I'm going to jump into the main app file, app.svelte. Lots of setup here. So here's a component. It's called Note. Here we go. And each of those items is a Note component. Then if I jump into Note, it's basically a div, and there's a lot of different events attached to this. This is a bit of a Svelte syntax, but the main thing I want you to see here is there's these events on drag start, on drag move. They map exactly to those touch events I showed. And then what I'm doing is when I start dragging, I add a little bit of logic to make sure it's not too sensitive. So if you're scrolling vertically, we don't want it to start reacting. Just a little bit of a threshold. And then from the event, I'm taking the delta dx, the delta of the on the x-axis, and applying it to this value called x. Y I don't touch because I'm only swiping left and right. And then all I'm doing with it is applying a transform. So in CSS, you can use transform translate, and that lets you shift the element on the XY axis. And I'm just applying it to a pixel value. So the delta that you're moving is changing the translation of that element. And that's it. And what's really cool is, and let's see if I can load up my REPL. I can't, not yet. Okay, that doesn't work either. It just automatically feels alive and tangible, which is really cool. Okay, we're in the home stretch. All right, so touch events are awesome. They only work on mobile devices or touch devices. Definitely try them out. Okay, and then as I mentioned, you can use Replit to build and test on device. We just did that. And it's a great way to very quickly launch and deploy where you're building and switch to it without any configuration. It's just really great. Cool. So our key takeaways in the session were: keep it simple. It's easier said than done, but you're going to be much more creative when you do this. Really push yourself. Handle the keyboard, super important. It's like our finicky pet. We love it, but we gotta do what it wants sometimes. Consider adding gesture-based features. It's not as scary as it sounds. And then you can use Replit to build and test. Okay, so I'm just gonna check the Q&A if there's anything here. But I do want to okay. Gotta fix the form link, and I will do that. So at Replit, we are always thinking about how to help you shorten the journey from idea to product. And in general, as you know, Amjad's story has been told through the keynote, we just want to make it easier and faster for you to build cool stuff. So I'm excited to, one last thing. So please fork my REPL. You can do a better job than I did with this app now that you know how to do it. Please publish your new and improved daily app to community with the hashtag REPLCon. Okay, so back to what I was saying. I'm excited to announce that we'll be launching a Replit native app for later this year, and it's going to be designed from the ground up. So I did see in the chat, we mentioned the PWA. This was something we released earlier last year, and it just takes a mobile web experience and makes it available to you through the Play Store. We want to completely reimagine the app using those principles, right? We want to keep it simple, but we want to think of mobile first use cases. We want to make it delightful and feel tactile. And these are the things that are going to be included. So you'll have easy access to your REPLs on the go. We're going to have a redesigned mobile editor. And not only that, we're going to have all new beginner-friendly and mobile content that comes with the app. So very exciting. And we want to partner with you all to make it better. So if you can join the beta, I'm going to fix the link. Let's see. All right. The link should be fixed. So please try again. If you join our beta program, you will have early access to the Android or iOS app, depending on your device. Please fill out the survey. Help us know, what we should be optimizing for. And we're super, super excited to involve our community as we build out the native app. All right, let me make sure that everyone has access to it. Is it still not working? It should be loading for all. Try, if you're still seeing you need permissions, try refreshing. Might take a little bit for Google to propagate the change. But try refreshing. Oh, still asking for permission. Okay, try this link instead. Here's the new link. Does it work? Okay, well, after my talk, we will make sure we publicize, we'll publicize the link on all our channels. So if it's still not working for you all, do not fear, we'll send out the link for it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming to my session. I hope you learned how to make web apps delightful for mobile devices. You can find me on Twitter at L1MES Limes. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the session. There's so much cool stuff coming up. Thanks, everyone.
program in a bash script that uses the ampersand symbol. And this is a bash symbol that will start the program and keep it running in the background so that I can execute this script multiple times and run several background Python processes. Oh, actually, I don't mean to click the start button. I need to do this in the shell. So I ran one, it's running in the background, it's still going. I'll run another, and we should see the CPU start to go up to 50%, perfect, 50%. Now another 75, and another, it's at 100. Cool. So yeah, starting to smoke there a little bit. So now what? What if I do it again? What do you think happens if I do it again? Will it run the program? Will it be able to do it? Well, actually, I'll do you one better. I'll run it like 10 more times. And it ran them, and it's actually running all of these processes. Right? So if I look at the number of processes that are running in this REPL, I'll make the screen a little bigger. You can see they're all there, and they're all using a lot of CPU. So what happens is all of the processes that are running on a computer share the CPU. And we use Linux. Linux has something called a completely fair scheduler that allocates CPU time to processes. So these processes are all running slowly. They're all experiencing something called process latency, which means that they may not be running like as fast as they could be, but they're still running. They'll still get to it. And I'll show you a little more about this. If you go into the shell and you type pop, this is a Linux command line utility that you can run. And you can see pop what portion of the CPU command line utility each thing is taking. What's interesting is that these are all the same exact program, but some of them are taking 33% CPU, and some are taking 11% or 10% or 12%, right? So the way Linux organizes this is really fascinating and complicated. It doesn't always give exactly equal amount to every process. So that's kind of something interesting we could dive into a little later. But another thing you'll notice from looking at this is that these percents add up to way more than 100%. This is, yeah, I mean, I'm not doing the math live right now, but you can see that's like way higher than 100%. And the reason for this is that the top resource, the top utility, when it tells you percent, it doesn't mean percent of total capacity, it means percent of one CPU core, right? So this top program is running, this program at the top of the output is running 33% of one CPU core, okay? And so when you add these all up, I'm not gonna do the math, but I think that's gonna be close to about 400% because again, we have the 4 CPU cores. So that's something that's kind of cool. With Nix, you can actually install other programs, like another popular one is HTOP. So it'll take a second. This REPL's running pretty slow because of all the garbage that I'm running. But it will prompt me to install it with Nix. And then it will show me a little more pleasing of a view. There we go. All right. So we get colors. Again, this is running really slow, so maybe not the best demonstration here, but there's tons of different programs. Someone mentioned GoTop in the chat. Lots of stuff. All right. That might be all I have to cover on CPU. Check my notes. I think that's it. Let me look in the Q&A tab real quick, see if there's anything. How to avoid if the REPL is too popular, try again later problem that we saw in the presentation about mobile programming. That one's actually not related to this issue. Typically when that happens, there's kind of like an issue on our infrastructure, and we kind of have to walk this fine line between a denial of service attack that someone may be executing against our infrastructure and like someone's just sharing a REPL that's very useful to people and is very popular. So we're still figuring out exactly the best way to do that, but long story short, that has nothing to do with the CPU and the RAM and all of that your REPL may be running. If you have a free account, it's only half a CPU. Yes, that's right. Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to kill this whole thing kill one. If that disconnects the REPL, and I'll refresh the page. And we can move on, unless there's any other questions. I'll see the questions. I'm guaranteed to see the questions if you put them in the Q&A tab. I only have a little bit of bandwidth to actually look through the chat. But if you do have results for the competition, then just put them in the chat, and Connor is collecting those. He's my host. If you have something to share, either a screenshot or a REPL link, just put that in the chat. Connor will pick it up. Why am I using light mode? Yeah, I don't want to get into a holy war here. Let's not touch that topic. Cool. Let's do memory. I'll look at the poll to see if, all right, RAM and storage are neck and neck, but we'll go with RAM because it's a little bit higher. Okay, so what actually is RAM? That's the question. We can see we have 4096 megabytes, which is 4 gigabytes, because there's 1024 megabytes in a gigabyte, just like there's 1024 bytes in a kilobyte and the same number of kilobytes in a megabyte. So we have 4 gigabytes of memory, and this is essentially short-term storage. You can actually think of RAM and storage as kind of the same thing conceptually, right? Like you use them for the same things, which is just for storing information. It's just that RAM is much faster, first of all, and second of all, it's volatile, which means that it will not persist when your computer is rebooted, or actually even when your process exits, right? So you're running a program, it's using RAM. As soon as that application ends, as soon as that process exits, all of that RAM is returned to the operating system and other applications can use it. Whereas with storage is more like the file system. Everyone shares the file system, and what you put there stays there no matter what. It's durable until you go in and delete it or someone else deletes it. So RAM is essentially the working space for data for any application. Now, what does that actually mean in practice? Well, so this one I'm going to do in the console here. What this means is all of your variables are stored in RAM. Okay, so what if we have a string? This stores a 4-character string. It's so imperceptibly small, it's like on the order of a couple bytes that are being stored here. So you don't barely notice anything moving in the RAM. And in fact, there's so much other stuff going on, it gets completely lost in the noise. So let's do a larger string. A 100,000 character string bumps us up to like 1/10 of a megabyte more, or maybe 1 megabyte more. So still not very much we're talking about here. We're the details of how Python allocates and stores these objects is beyond my scope of discussion today, but it does use memory in some capacity to store these variables. So let's do something we have a little more control over. What if I do the byte array and I tell it to allocate 1 gigabyte? Okay, you can see there it is. It used about 1024 megabytes, which is the argument to byte array is in bytes. And so I have to multiply it out a couple times to get a gigabyte. But let's do it again. This is kind of interesting. Nothing happened this time. Does anyone know why? Well, so Python does something called garbage collection. And most languages, almost every modern language does garbage collection, with the exception of Rust, C++, and a few others. And what this means is if you cannot access an area of memory that you have allocated, the programming language runtime or the garbage collector will come and scoop it back up and release it back to the operating system. Okay, so in this case, I've allocated this very large byte array to the same variable. Okay, so it allocated a new byte array, and then it assigned it to my X variable, and then this first byte array became unreachable. It became such that there's no way to access it, and so it goes away. But if I assign this to a different variable, you'll see that it shows up. Rust doesn't have a garbage collector because it's not garbage. That's pretty good. All right, Connor, are you collecting these REPLs that people are linking? Maybe we'll go over them at the end. Cool. So you can see pretty straightforwardly how this extrapolates to other things. Oh, cool. Connor's up.
Yes. I think Jace was the first one, so I'll throw his in chat. He maxed it out via storage.
All right, let's check this out. I'll try to fork the REPL. Will it work if I fork it?
Yep.
All right, let's see what you got. Always takes forever to load these because you're using the entire file system. Okay, that's technically orange. It's not technically red. It's very close though. And I'm just gonna hit run here. Let's see if okay, so it was killed. Let's try it again. This is something that happens when you just barely step over the line of memory. So I'll actually show you an example in this REPL that I'm working on. Do another, and then if I do another, I'll get killed, right? So I can go all the way up to 99.99999% of memory. If I get to like 100.0001%, the operating system will kill the process. So that's what makes this challenging. But yeah, why does it do that? It's worth talking about that for a second. Why does the operating system kill your process if you run out of memory? Well, this kind of illustrates a fundamental difference between CPU and RAM. CPU is something you can schedule, right? CPU is where you say, I want to run this, and I'd like to run it as fast as possible. But if I have to wait in a line, if I have to wait in a queue, that's okay. Like, it's not the end of the world for most applications to have a little bit of process latency. But memory doesn't really make sense. Like, no one really writes their programs thinking, this memory access, I might have to wait in line for memory to be available for me to use this. It's just not the paradigm that we're used to. I think there could theoretically be an operating system that's more based around that model, but it doesn't make a ton of fundamental sense. There is something I will say that's related to this, which is called swap memory, if you've heard of this. We don't have it on Replit, but on most other computer systems, like physical computer systems, the operating system actually allows you to use more than the technically available space of memory. It allows you to allocate more than is actually there. And it will supplement it with blocks from the disk, right? So if you use too much memory, it'll swap your memory pages from the active set into a persistent storage. Or it's actually not persistent, but it's on a persistent device is what I'm getting at. It uses your hard drive to supplement your available memory. This is kind of an interesting technique. It's a little bit controversial sometimes because it does slow you down quite a bit. Like, it makes all of your memory accesses potentially be able to trigger a page fault is what it's called. And that initiates a swap between memory and disk. And so that can be like really catastrophic for certain applications, but it does technically allow you to use more memory than is available. So some people find that helpful, but that's not something we're able to enable on Replit. Cool. Is there anything else I was going to cover? I think that's pretty much all I wanted to cover on memory. I'll maybe go back to this. I have hope for this REPL. The problem is we don't update this resource bar fast enough. I think we do every 2 seconds for CPU and RAM, and storage. Well, storage is a little easier, but if this were updating every like millisecond, I'm sure it would be. I'm sure it would work. All right, there's a lot more to try. Connor, which one should I do next?
I say let's do Code Monkeys. He's got an interesting name. I'll post the link too.
All right, let me try this one.
The title's also hilarious. Fabulous tasty portable software. That's a good
Portable
generation.
I didn't know portable software was one word. Cool. All right, we got some big files here. Let me check out this program. Okay, infinite loop. All right. Run a bunch of them. You trash the disk. Okay. Let's see if this uses memory. Okay, CPU's red. I don't see any RAM usage though. Maybe it's coming. It's very slowly going up with these with the DD commands. Oh, and it's actually regenerating the file, so the storage went back down. That's funny. Yeah, if there's like an incident right now, I'm sorry to the Replit team in advance. Okay, cool. Okay, try doing anything in the shell. Let's see. Let's run. Can't see it very well. Actually seems to be running okay. Maybe slightly more sluggish, but you know, we got to get a little more hardcore with these REPLs. Okay, RAM's going up there. I think it's because I'm on a hacker plan, and so I have 4 GB of RAM or 3,200 megabytes. That makes this harder. All right, cool. Last thing we want to cover. Oh, there's a little Q&A here. What is the icon below unit testing in the sidebar? Oh, that's a special developer thing that we get access to at Replit. So that shows me some. I'm not going to click on it because I don't know if it's sensitive. It's probably not, but just to be safe, that gives me like some debug information about the REPL. So that's helpful for us when we're building the product. How come the numbers change even if nothing's running? That is a really good question. The answer is that something is running, right? There's never really nothing happening on the computer. If the computer's on, something's happening. In the case of Replit, like some people were joking about this earlier, but if you create like a Java REPL, the things that it runs in the background are more expensive than like other stuff, than other REPLs. You can see it's using like kind of a lot of CPU right out of the gate. And the way to kind of fix this is to turn off, oh, it's already disabled. Well, that's interesting. Typically, when you disable code intelligence, that will make things, there we go. We go back to 0%. And what code intelligence does is we run a language server within your REPL container, and we allow you to interface with it to get things like autocomplete, mostly autocomplete. I think some languages might have other features, go to definition, you know, like tell you some more information about your REPL. So that's kind of the answer. That's what's running in the background. Some languages, like every language has a different language server implemented. And so some of those are just the implementations aren't as good that we have available to work with. And we try to supplement those and fix them where we can. But just the ecosystem is not always as advanced as you may want it to be, and that's okay. Are we going to get in trouble if we try this? No, you won't. We do a little bit of monitoring on these kind of things, but just like running like infinite loops and stuff is not going to trigger that. Wouldn't updating the CPU and RAM more frequently be detrimental to the performance of the REPL? Yes, and that is kind of our trade-off here, right? Like, what you don't think about is one thing that the REPL is always doing is it's monitoring itself, right? So your 0.6% CPU usage, that might be the REPL resource pane saying, hey, how much CPU are you using, right? So everything has a cost when it comes to computers. Every action that you might want to take needs to process instructions, needs to use some amount of data, and occasionally needs to use storage, less often, but sometimes. And so that's a trade-off that we have to consider here. That's actually why the storage bar updates every 15 seconds, because we have to do a little more work to calculate that value. So storage is a little bit more slow to update, and then CPU and RAM are 2 seconds or something like that. Cool. All right. I think I covered the Q&A. Dip my toes in the chat. This is a little too chaotic for me. Let me think if there's anything else that I was going to cover here. I'll just briefly say on storage that you have this bar here that's really useful. Some of the other tools you might use in the shell might give you different values, and that's because we run something called BTRFS or ButterFS, which stands for B-tree file system. That's just the type of Linux file system that we're running in these REPLs. And the way it represents data internally doesn't always interact well with other tools. So for example, if you run df or disk free, make this a little wider, you get just like a ton of insane values. You get like, it thinks there's like a 2 terabyte drive, 2.4 gigabytes in your REPL, 32 gigabyte temporary things. I mean, it's just total chaos. One thing that you can do slightly more accurate is disk usage. This works differently because it will only work on files that actually have an entry in the file system. So sometimes you have a file open that is using storage, but doesn't have an entry in the file system, and the disk usage command will not catch that. And again, due to the ButterFS thing, the values are slightly different between what disk usage returns and what the storage bar tells you. So generally, you can just trust the storage bar. That'll be the most accurate thing. And then these other tools, you may have to kind of dig into their documentation just to see how they work. Cool. All right, we have 2 minutes left. I can look at one more REPL, see if we can get to that elusive red, if anyone's got it. Which one should I do, Connor? Who was first?
I think Brandon Johannes, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. He says he's maxed RAM and CPU. So let me.
All right. Oh boy.
I think it's printing hello world over and over again.
The fact that the CPU says 0% means it's broken. So maybe you broke it. There we go. All right. What that actually, that's really interesting. So that really illustrates that on when you're running so much CPU, processes slow down. In this case, the process that's slowing down is the resource, commands that are communicating. All right, it went back down. One problem you may run into with all these print commands that's kind of interesting is that when you execute a print command, it has to write some data to an external device, which is then displayed to the user. And while it is writing data, it actually isn't executing instructions, right? So the process goes to sleep while that data finishes, and then the kernel, returns to the process. And so you may notice that, like, if you're printing a lot of stuff, that actually uses less CPU. All right, I don't know what's happening here. Maybe I accidentally typed something. We really broke this one. Anyway, if you're printing stuff, it may use slightly less CPU, but I think you're running enough processes to compensate. All right, this is the closest one I've seen. I don't have any prizes for you, but you can maybe put it on your Twitter bio or something. Official winner of Replit Burn It to the Ground competition on April 2nd, 2022. So thanks for joining, everybody. That's all I got for you. Now I think there's some other sessions you can go check out. Thanks for hanging out. This is really fun.
of 2020. So it's been a little over a year and a half, and we were a strong and mighty team of 12 when I joined. And to share a little bit about my career path, it's been a bit twisty. I came from a company as a co-founder, and it didn't work out. And one of the best lessons, as we all know, is dealing with, honestly, failure. And I always had a love and passion and a hobby for coding. Kind of thought here and there I might go into engineering, and then decided, no, I really like business. And I had a summer of learning, and I had a friend who wanted to learn how to code. And we spent an hour and a half. I'm running Linux, he's running OS, and I could not help him download and install packages on a local IDE. And I thought I scared him away from a career transition. Instead, he came back to me with what I thought was an Italian company and ended up being Replit. And it was magical. It was so fun. We started coding right along with each other. I taught him some syntax, got him up to recursion. It's magic to me. And yeah, we had a lot of fun. So I'm here to share about how we scaled our team from 2 summers ago of around 12 people to now we're over 60. So with that in mind, we really heavily focus on why. Why are we around? What do we look for? Beyond some really strong technical and hard skills that we look for in teammates, it's really important that everybody here, whether they're new to Replit or they've been since the very beginning, that they're all invested in the mission. And that is part of helping to bring the next billion coders online. This technical literacy is a raison d'etre, if you will. It's a reason why we wake up in the morning and work at a startup. So part of that is one person is not going to do that. It is a group effort. So into that is we have millions of community members. We have thousands joining Replicon today. We are 60 people less over at Replit. So we have to think radically. We have to think outside of the box. How can we scale and ensure we build for our wonderful community with such a strong and mighty team? So part of that is when we see somebody have a twinkle in their eye and they get really excited about something, it's a strong encouragement over here to say, hey, you should pull on that thread, see where it leads. And this is where a lot of this fun stuff that was getting announced today is coming from. Are these ideas, and it's not just siloed into what the team that we're on or the pod we're working on, but constantly exchanging ideas for other things that we don't do on a regular basis. Another part of that is what we call urgency and focus. We don't just sit back, make sure it's perfect, and then ship it. No, we don't want things to break. We try really hard to make sure what we release is amazing, but we really tend to ensure that we are making things go fast. And it's really honestly exciting and satisfying to work this way. So if that sounds like you, we should chat. You should definitely look into startups. So what's in the name? Roses smell sweet, right? But really it's something that we embody over here. Ours for us being read. We're inquisitive. We talk to our community members. We look at data. And then we dog food the goodness out of Replit to ensure that what we're doing is what we use internally, and then we ship it out to our community so they can enjoy it and then give us feedback, because the next thing to do, is actually evaluate. So we turn this data. It's great to understand things and go through, but we need to evaluate, not just one ear out the other, but to really sit with it and make sure that we can do the best we can do with it. So that leads us into P. Print, part of the REPL. So we want to get this out. It's part of the urgency and focus, right? Because you can think forever, but you gotta let it go out into the world and get some feedback. And so there's very low ego when it comes into that. We wanna hear your thoughts. And last is for loop. So the faster everything goes out, the faster we learn, the faster we can improve, and the sooner you get to play with what we work with. Next one is, we seek pain. We don't run away from the roar. Like, please be kind. We try really hard. We really care about what we do, but also give it to us straight. We want to hear from feedback, not only from our teammates, but also from our community and other people, particularly if you're new to Replit. We love hearing that fresh, early perspective. So we run towards that. And honestly, it's probably one of our biggest competitive advantages as a startup. And then from there, we're for people. So this is a little sneak peek to, I think, an image that's not very much out there. This is from our Hack Week. And our Hack Week we do once a year, and we get together either online or in person if we can, and we run with some really cool stuff. It's a hackathon, it's internal. And so a lot of, again, the things you're seeing today came from Hack Week. They've been kind of percolating in our brains for a little bit, and then we decided, hey, gather a team together. We pitched it, people formed teams, and then we had a big demo of it. So this was our picnic after that with about maybe half of our teammates were there in person. So a little bit of tips and tricks. We are a ton of different things. When I first started, I think we had like 3 roles open. Now we have a lot, and a lot more that we want to launch as soon as we can continue to build our people and recruiting team so that we can hire on more people and support them when they come on. So we hire for all these things. People are here. Our hiring managers, aka our Deans, our Scotts, our Limas, our Jeremys, our Barons, they're here today and are excited to chat with you in just a few minutes. So if you are curious about one of these fields or you're already in this career, come chat with us. We're open books. We'd love to get into it with you. And so for how we interview, first step is we chat with a recruiter or a hiring manager. This is typically a 30-minute meeting. It's a get to know you, and I call it a 10-10-10. First 10 questions or 10 minutes is around the fact of like, hi, how are you? Icebreaker conversation, and get to know what you're doing. So we see your resume. Everybody reads that resume and all the email or the information you put in. And if you submitted a warm-up code challenge, we look into that. I promise you, humans are behind there. And then we go in and chat with you for 10 minutes. And then we go into logistics, like what's your pacing for interviews? We like to keep at least 10 minutes so we can chat with you and start answering your questions. After that, it depends which track you're in, which job you're applying for, it can change, but it's digging into your hard skills. So seeing what you know, digging deeper into areas of, are you fit for this role? Maybe it's pure product engineering, maybe it's more workspace. Sometimes we see triple threats in all of them. So it's really funny to see behind the scenes Slack conversations go off and seeing how we pace into the interviews. That happens with the technical screen. And then from there, we're heavily project-based on our on-sites. So we highly focus on making sure that you can show and demonstrate your skills and not focus on solving algo puzzles. And we really want to see a really functional display of what you know, whether that's within people operations, and you've done that before, and you're going into that, or you're a security engineer. We want to see what you actually can and do on a daily basis. So that's how we design our virtual on-sites. From there, we go into a founder's call. So before that, we actually send you our operating principles, which I think landed in our blog post last week. And it's really important, again, that you read them. There's no pop quiz. We're not going to ask you, seek pain, sentence 3, what's it say? It's not about that. It's about what they mean to you and having a conversation with our founders so that we can ensure that you're really going to like working here, because we hire for the long term. We don't want you to just be like, okay, well, we'll see you in a year. We want you to be with us for years and years and years. And it's really important. So some generalized tips going into some fun things is, again, we don't do gotcha questions. We don't do algo puzzles. Things are very functional knowledge. We want to see how you solve problems. From there, it's highly collaborative. We are humans behind the screen. We are having conversations with you. I promise I'm not a robot. And it's not all Q&A on either end. Like, don't ask us all the questions. We want you to lead the interviews. We also don't want to just be answering the whole time, or you answering the whole time, and have it not interactive, because we are a remote team. We're highly communicative. We look for communicative, proactive communicators, and we want to make sure that we can dynamically create together in whatever role that you're applying for. And then also, whether, again, you're interviewing for something along the lines of engineering or recruiting or legal, we want to have you think it through in a clean and functional manner. Can you build something? Can you share how you've built something and take us through the step-by-step process? Because we only have a finite amount of time. We want to be able to see that you can build something fast and iterate, and you really embody the REPL kind of process. Awesome. From there, I'm actually a little bit early, so that's fine. We have, as I mentioned at the very beginning, some amazing teammates here who are so excited to chat with you. So if you'd like to just take a few moments and think about some questions about how do you interview for data? How do you interview for design? Anything along those lines, we're going to break out, sorry, not truly break out, found out that we broke it that way. We're going to have other sessions and we will have some teammates in there. We have our amazing VP of Eng, Dan, helping to discuss all things Replit and hiring. We have Alima here as well, digging deep into mobile with you. Scott, who is fearlessly holding down both workspace and platform. And also Jeremy, who's been with us for quite some time, which is awesome. He is our product engineering manager. So they'll be in one session starting around 12:20. Might be there a little early and start chatting if you like. We'll have another time at the same time, starting at 12:20-ish. We have Cecilia, who is our general counsel and head of business, holding down all your questions if that kind of career interests you or you're already in it. We have Lena, of course, the person who created RepoCon for us, sharing a lot of deep insights within our community and marketing teams. And of course, Baron, amazing designer, has been helping us hire and build out our designer codes, product engineers. We're looking for a web and content designer if anybody's interested. Go over and chat with these folks. They're super excited to answer your questions. And then last but not least, Kenton is our amazing recruiter here. We have another one joining us on Monday. We're so excited. Him and I, and as well as Tala, who is amazing. She was helping us with people and being our intern for there until she switched over recently to community. So she's going to be here with us, staying on this link here, more focused on people, which means people operations, experience, things along those lines, as well as recruiting. So we're so excited to chat with you. Feel welcome to drop over to the other areas. And yeah. So yes, as we said, we're already having some questions come in. That's fantastic. Feel welcome to drop over here, or again, stay in this session if you want to chat with people in recruiting.